Today we're going to take a look at the progression of a dual blade player, although you can probably apply it to other weapons too, but since I only play dual blades, let's keep it at that for now. How do you progress through the game as a dual blade player? The first thing I want to talk about is the monster field guide. You can find it in your menu right here, and you go to large monsters field guide and you can see all of the big monsters in the game. What is this monster actually weak to? Where are the weak spots? Oh, this monster is weak to ice and thunder. Also, poison is very effective. Paralysis is very effective. And at the very bottom, you can also see some items that you can use. Sonic Boom doesn't do anything, but Flash Pod, Shock Trap, and Pitfall Trap. But just by looking at this little guide that you have in-game, you can basically determine, oh, maybe I should use a water weapon against this. Maybe I should use a fire or thunder weapon against the spider thing. Maybe I should use fire against this dragon. You know what I mean? So, since the game itself isn't incredibly hard, just by knowing, but just by looking this up in-game, you can kind of make a pretty educated decision what to craft next. Maybe this boss, you're struggling with this boss specifically, I'll make a fire weapon. Let's get into the actual progression guide and what I would recommend personally. Let's start with low rank. The very early low rank stuff is basically irrelevant. Just upgrade as you go. If there's a new set, go for it. If it looks cool, go for it as well. There's not much to it. I think the first kind of cool set to have as a dual blade is the Valahara set, because it gives you a little bit of evade extender, making it a little bit nicer to dodge, but it's not really big of a deal, right? Early low rank, do whatever you want. Then you get to Hirabami set, which is evade window, which is much better than evade extender, by the way, because this is actually the iframe that it has, that allows you to go more easily go into your dodge form. The Aja Rakan set I used only the chest piece for a while. You can see a little bit what items that I actually had while being in low rank that I actually had myself. I did a little bit of Raydao set, a little bit of New Udra set. I bought one item here or something, but the real big deal, and that's where it kind of starts to become a little bit more relevant, is the Guardian sets, especially Guardian Rathalos and Guardian Ebony, which is the Odogaron set. Both of these are probably the strongest set in low rank, especially for dual blades, because dual blades are mostly elemental weapons, and both of these sets can be very, very nice for that. So if you want to really do fire damage, I would recommend the Guardian Rathalos set. Specifically, this setup I think is pretty good. They do weakness exploit here, another weakness exploit there, intimidator and weakness exploit there as well. What this set really does is it gives you a passive set effect that makes you deal additional fire damage, which is obviously really nice if you're playing a fire build. We'll get into the weapons in just a second. So my recommendation is, once you get to this point and you do want to play a fire dual blade, go with the Guardian Rathalos helmet, chest, gloves, and greaves or boots. And then you also get the Guardian Odogaron pants. It says coil, I don't know what that means, but yeah, you get what I'm saying. So those four into this will last you for a long time into high rank. This is a crazy setup if you want to do fire damage. Same thing the other way around, kind of. For if you want to do any other element, I would recommend a 4-set Odogaron, or Ebony in this case, Guardian Ebony. Get that 4-set, so these 4 pieces, the helmet, the chest, the gloves, and the pants, which gives you a good amount of burst, and gives you the full set effect again, which further increases the benefits you get from burst, or rather the duration, and gives you some bonus attack stuff. And then you complete that with the boots from the Rathalos set that you already had before. So those are the 2 options I think that are incredibly strong in low rank. There's probably some other niche builds or some heroic setups or something, but I think these 2 are just stand out to me. These 2 are way better than the others, and before that the sets aren't as great. But this is where it really starts to come around. So let's look at the weapons through that period, I would say. Early game, you don't have that many options for really cool blades. I think the Chemitrist tree is not super bad, but it's also very easy to get. So if you don't have any other options, I would probably try to get that early on. But generally speaking, you don't have many good options. What I did, I actually started with a para weapon, which ended up not being super strong, but it's kind of nice because you can stun the boss and do some big damage, right? So that's what I kind of started with, but again, similar thing to the armors, very early game, there's not much to talk about. When the really interesting weapons, once again, start around the time you also get those armor pieces. That is through the Guardian Rathalos weapons and the Guardian Ebony Odogaron weapons as well. So those two are once again very, very, very good. Also, note on the bottom right, you can see it, I think. Am I blocking it? Barely. So on the Guardian Rathalos weapons, if you press R and then go to skill info, you can see the passives that it has. And this one passive is critical element, which is really nice with a weapon that has relatively high base affinity, which is 15%. Although the elemental damage isn't that high, it's really... I used this for a long time, and it was a crazy weapon, which you can also eventually upgrade, right? So it's actually a really good weapon, I think, but I basically only use this. I think maybe even better is the Odogaron weapon. Although the passive isn't as good, it has massive amount of elemental damage, and as you know, dual blades scale very well with element. So the more element, the better. Obviously, later on, there's a lot of min-maxing you can do, but generally speaking, these two low-rank weapons stand out to me as well. Very strong, obviously. If you're struggling with a boss that is weak to water, these weapons aren't bad at all. Also, the blast weapons I used for a little bit before that, I think. The Ajarakan blast weapons, these were also pretty good. Decent affinity, some blast damage, which can really help out early game because blast damage is actually always the same even in late game. What changes is only the amount of blast buildup that you apply. So blast weapons early game are also really strong. That would be my recommendation for now. I would say go for the blast weapons once you get them, and then choose between a dragon weapon or fire weapon and go from there. You're gonna be just fine. You're gonna blast through the game. Once you get to high rank, this is around this time. That's when I got these, I don't know how to pronounce it, cuckoo weapons. These had not a whole lot of crit or anything, but very nice base stats. So I was running these for a while. Although they're giga ugly, they were pretty good, and also very useful because you can craft them later into pretty good weapons as well. Which then also leads us into high rank, and we will just continue with the weapons, and then I'll show you the armors to it, right? So yeah, I think I stuck with these weapons for way too long, and then instead of swapping, I didn't end up doing that, I think. Once you get to high rank, the real goal for me was these weapons. The Guardian Fulgur Anjanath weapons. Why? Because they come with level 3 critical element, which is absolutely insane. Just baseline on a weapon, that's about as good as it's gonna get. And also they have pretty good thunder damage, pretty good affinity, pretty good base damage. Sockets become important now too, so you always have to look at those. You can see them. I'll zoom into it. Every weapon has sockets, and the weapon sockets are actually the most important. So yeah, the weapon decoration options can really change how you build your character. So the better sockets, the better your weapon's gonna end up being. Yes, so this was my weapon of choice in high rank early on, and eventually I also upgraded it, but that takes a while. So I ended up just running this for a long time. Although, again, I think you can also go with the Rathalos build, or... and we just talked about this Ebony Odogaron set as well, if you get there. Still, Blast is probably still fine. So something like that I would recommend. I'm not really a big fan of weapons that have minus affinity or low affinities usually, unless they have very high base stats. But I think crit scaling is pretty crazy. I also think the Blangonga tree weapons are pretty good. You can also go with these, but... I would prefer something that has crit, and this one is definitely not that. But again, monster guide, look at the elements that might be good, right? So after this, I upgraded to the Fulgur Twins Guardiana. Why? Because, actually I'll show you this, just how I looked that up while I was figuring out how to do my high rank. Again, I went to the large monsters, and the next best dragon weapon came from this monster right here. Meaning, oh, it's weak to thunder. So maybe actually continuing the upgrade of my thunder weapons, probably a good idea. Potentially a good idea. So that's exactly what I did. I upgraded this the previous Anjanath weapons to the full ones, and this one is already pretty crazy. But from here, you have a pretty good setup to farm whatever you want. Even if you want to farm bosses that aren't necessarily weak to thunder, these are pretty fucking strong. What I did is then I swapped and I started farming this tree. I wanted to get the Flederclown. I don't know why that's... is that supposed to be German? I don't know. And Hungerclown, that's definitely German. So these ones are both very good weapons to get started in the upper echelons of high rank, to farm Arcvelds, to farm more Gormegala, whatever you want. These are really great starting high rank weapons. And then with those, you can start grinding your Artian weapons, which are actually the best ones in the game. So that's what I did. Lightning into Dragon, and then you go for Artian weapons. So the same goes again for the armor. Funnily enough, high rank is also similar, that early on there's not that much crazy stuff going on. I think also the best first set is probably Hatku Kutku again. I think this is very easy to get, but either of these sets is fine again. Like, there's nothing crazy that stands out to me. So similarly, the Guardian stuff is really interesting in high rank. For example, this Guardian Fulgur set from the Anjanath, which we just talked about the weapon of. This is also not a bad thing to farm. But what I really like, once again, are the Guardian Ebony set, which we just talked about in low rank, and also the Guardian Rathalos set once again. If you go for the fire route, same thing here. This is basically this very similar set, but just, you know, better. One thing though that is new in high rank is the alpha and beta split sets, basically. As you can see, Balahara here has two different sets, not just looks wise like before, and that is because one set focuses more on sockets and one set focuses more on gear stats, if that makes sense. So for example, on the Balahara helmet, you can see it has evade window level 1 and geologist level 1 as well. I think you can see that. I'm not blocking it. Okay. You can see that this alpha set has two equipment skills on it, baseline and just a level 1 socket. Beta, on the other hand, gets the socket upgraded but loses one of the equipment skills. In this case, geologist. I don't need geologist. What is that even? It has nothing to do with combat. I don't care about that. So in that case, I would much rather have a level 2 socket than geologist, right? So this is also a choice you will have to be making in high rank. Would you prefer more sockets, or would you prefer the stats that are already on the item? Usually the beta sets are more interesting, but there are exceptions, and sometimes it's very obvious that the alpha sets are better. I would recommend, no matter what you do, to get the Guardian Ebony set though, because the burst is really nice. You can max it out with this set, and as you can see here, I'm still wearing one of these helmets now after I basically min-maxed my character to the max. So I would highly recommend this set because it's crazy good for dual blades. It's very easy to stack the burst, which basically means you just have to hit a mob a certain amount of time, you get the full benefit, and that's very easy as a dual blade player. So early on, this set is absolutely insane. I personally went for beta helmet, beta chest piece, alpha on the gloves because it gives 2 bursts instead of 1, which is a very crucial stat, and beta pants again. Now for the shoes, you can be creative. I think I did this one from the monkey, but it doesn't really matter. Like, the important part is that you have 4 set ebony, and that goes a long way. And eventually you get to even stronger monsters, and that's how I made a guide about the full set that I have currently, that you can see on the left as well, which is my full dragon set. And yeah, that's a whole different ballpark here, and there's a lot of different options that can be useful. But for me, I think the 4-set gore is insane. Like, I can just show you my stats one more time, but I would probably recommend watching the other video where I go more into detail if you're interested in this. This is the craziest amount of damage you can ever do, and you basically have 100% affinity even in combat with all of the setup. Like, you can do some crazy things in the end game of this game currently, and you can do crazy amounts of damage. Oh, and one more thing is probably the Palico, because you will have the Palico with you at all times. It's actually pretty simple. Usually you just want to look at the armor and what kind of resistances are on it, depending on what you want to fight. But the defense stat on this is probably the most important. The weapon is a little bit more interesting. What I would recommend is a weapon that has a status effect. Something like Sleep, something like what I'm wearing, Blast. paralysis. I think the Lalabarina paralysis weapon mine was wearing for a long time, because your cat is not going to do that much damage regardless, but having like some sort of status effect like a paralysis where the boss can be stunned for a while is super useful. Just a bonus tip. That being said, that's basically the progression guide for the dual blades. I know there was a lot of yapping. Next up, I actually have planned a group build. I have a very interesting setup for a group dual blade build, maybe even a support build if you want, and that's probably going to be in the next video. So thanks for tuning in, thanks for hanging out. I'll see you in the next one, and I hope that helped. And if you have any questions, feel free to write a comment. I usually read all of them. So yeah, have a good one. Peace.